Why would I want to sit down, take my lesson, reconfigure it, restructure it, just because John didn't buckle down and learn how to read? All right? By God, he's 15, he ought to be able to read this chapter. Everybody else in the class can read the chapter. All right? Why would I want to do this? And you're going to have to sit down with a teacher and actually break those kind of things out. Now again, one of the pluses or minuses of this situation is that the bottom line is, if it's a plan, they've got to do it. What I find oftentimes is that if I go in and collect data on what teachers are currently doing, they are putting more time and effort into doing something that won't work than it will take them to do something that will work. So oftentimes the incentive becomes, I can take a lot of this away from you. It's nothing for me to go in and see a teacher who's reprimanding the kid every minute, minute and a half and saying, do you know how much energy you're expending on Billy? Of all the comments you made today during this class, 42% of them dealt with behavior, not math. Okay? You are putting an incredible amount of energy into something. One of the incentives I can give you is that we can reduce that number. We can increase your math time. We can increase, you didn't become a math teacher to deal with behavior. I can give you back some joy of teaching by allowing you to do more teaching. Okay? It can be part of what your process becomes. All right? Looking at those roadblocks, what can they anticipate? We talked about this. All right. Then we go to stage 3. This is one that everybody wants to get to. We oftentimes want to work out of our head and not their head. So now it's, what do I have to do to get what I want or need? And I want to identify actions that will actually help them achieve those outcomes. So again, I might be doing some brainstorming around the list of possible actions. Which ones fit best for you? All right? So if I've got a situation, I use this example all the time, so I'll just keep using it. I taught math and science at one time in another lifetime. If I was trying to teach cell structure, and I've got a class of 9th graders, and I've got this handout, it's a 4-page handout, it's written at the 9th grade level. I want you to read this silently to yourselves, and then I'm going to have you draw a cell, list all the parts, and then I'm going to have a little contest. I'm going to point to cell parts, I'm going to say, what is this? And she's going to say, oh, that's a vacuole. I'm going to say, you're absolutely right, you just want to point for your team, good job. What's the vacuole? And she's going to say, oh, that's what stores the waste products for the cell. Great, good job, you just got to point for your team. And that's my lesson plan. And I drop it on the class, but unfortunately here, April reads at the 4th grade, 3rd month level. My handout is at the 9th grade level. When I give her that handout, what is April going to do? She's going to look at it, and she's going to realize, I can't read this. Now, she's probably not going to raise her hand and say, excuse me, Mr. Van Acker, I did a quick readability. This is written at the 9th grade, 3rd month. I read 4th grade, 3rd month. Bit of a dilemma. Okay? All right? Probably not going to do that. Okay? She might look at it for a minute, and then all of a sudden she's going to start screwing around. What am I going to do as the teacher? April, get to work. That's all April needed. A verbal reprimand, now she can read it. Right? Now, April's not stupid. She's going to look at the paper again, and I'm going to say, whew, God's back in his heaven. She's back on task. Life is good. She still can't read it. A little bit later, she's going to be screwing around again, and I'm going to keep reprimanding until one of us get tired of this game, and either she tells me to do whatever she can tell me to do with this science project, or I send her out of the room. All right? When I send her out of the room because she's now become disruptive and defiant, what do I send her out of the room for? What do I say? Why did I say it when I send the message to the principal? What's the message? April is disruptive. The data that you will see as the behavior person that's going to do this is that I've got a kid who's disruptive. What's the problem? She can't read. Again, that's why I need to go in and collect data in terms of what's going on. All right, what's happening here? How could I have solved that problem?
Explained it. I mean, you could have did a whole group explanation, because April is probably not the only one.
Okay, so I could have done a presentation where I'm talking about cell structure and not had a situation where they had to read independently at some level. Okay, so I could have just done a presentation on cell structure, because hopefully her listening comprehension and whatever's going on, that she's going to be able to understand, and I make sure that I've got it at the level that hopefully can get it at the kid's level. What else could I have done?
Different level handout.
I could have had different level handouts. All right, and I could say, you read whatever one you want. All right, you got a couple here, you pick the one you want, because I don't even care if you can read and you still pick the low one. You're still going to learn about cell structure. What else could I have done?
2 groups, and the group discusses and submits one answer.
I could have given it to a group. I could pair a reader with a non-reader. I could call on people to read, because this is not a reading assignment. This is a science assignment, and I know who can read, so I'm just going to call on people. There's a dozen things I could do that would have made this information available to April. Now my issue is, which one fits best with this teacher and the way they teach? There's usually not just one answer. So I think of the different options, and then I think, okay, well, how could we do this? If I'm going to keep April engaged and April can't read, I can't say read chapter 4. Let's look at some ways we can get this information to her in science. Okay. So again, identify those possible actions. We're doing brainstorming, we're probing, we're asking questions that can help the teacher come up with some better ideas. All right. Want as many alternatives as possible. Again, I want to involve this teacher as much as I can, because that's going to give me the idea of where she's at or where he's at and what they're thinking. What ideas, what solutions might they come up with? Okay. Starting to look at things like, if I need help. So all of a sudden now I've got this kid, April can't read. I've got to differentiate the lessons. This is not only going to be just in terms of the material getting to her, quizzes, all kinds of stuff is going to, I all of a sudden realize this kid can't read at this level. All right? What's available out there? All right? Who do I have? Are there people? Are there models or exemplars of what we could do or what the teacher wants to accomplish? How could what are some other ways we can engage kids who can't read? Is there resources out there in terms of the community? So like, for example, with hearing impairment, and I can't help but think, and this is, I do some work with Wisconsin School for the Deaf, and I'm up there every now and then, but this is not an area that I can say, gee, I'm an expert in hearing impairment and deafness. But I can't help but think there are a number of those issues that bear into teachers in terms of, is there information available in the deaf community? Is there information available in terms of different websites? Illinois Resource Center. Where can I get help and support that would give me some sense of what I can do here? All right? What kind of organizations and programs are out there? They don't have to do everything on their own. What's my support network? What am I going to do for me to get support in terms of that I'm doing it well, the actions are happening? Can I recognize that? Who can I share concerns with? Again, select that best fit. I'm going to come up with a plan now, keep my goal realistic. All right? I may have to have a balance sheet, and some people, I actually write this out. What's the pluses and the minuses for doing this? What do you gain, what do you lose? I oftentimes just do it verbally, but there are times where I'll actually take flip charts and we'll go through this with the team. Let's look at what's going on here. And I'm talking too fast again. I want things to be specific. I want it to be substantive, and that is the fact that there's something really in this plan, and people understand what it is. I know I mentioned before, I've gone into schools, and their BIP was they went to the Hawthorne Press books that have the pages that say, I've got a kid who's fighting, and you look up fighting, and it has 114 things you can do. They Xeroxed the page, stapled it to the FBA, that was their BIP. All right? Not very specific. All right? You're going to have to make a plan. There might be 30 options. Pick the one you're going to do based on best fit, based on what you know of the kid. This is what we're going to try. It might not work. But here is the plan. It's not one of 9 plans. This is what we're all doing. We're very specific about it. It's realistic. And hopefully it's philosophically and empirically sound. Now, the dilemma that we have in terms of the 119 places in No Child Left Behind, it says you're going to use empirically validated interventions. The dilemma is that in many cases we don't have the science behind a lot of the things that we do in a level of specificity necessary. So while, for example, we know reinforcement works, we know that certain strategies of applied behavior analysis or certain strategies of cognitive behavioral interventions work in general, all that kind of treatment and characteristic interactions haven't always been worked out. We extrapolate. Most of my work is with kids with emotional and behavioral disorders. Quite frankly, much of what we know in terms of even academic interventions, we simply extrapolate from LD. Because there's such a high correlation. Well, if it works with LD, it must work with kids with behavior problems. And we know in some cases that's not true. I can't help but think that's probably even more the case in issues around kids who have hearing impairments where there's not the depth of research always available to you to say, I can empirically sit down and say, I know this is going to work. You're going to be doing some extrapolating. All right. So the balance sheets, again, not for everybody. Some people that's just too concrete. So what's acceptable? To what degree are these benefits acceptable? In what ways are these benefits unacceptable? And the same thing with costs. All right, I'm going to make a plan. I want to be specific. They've looked at those costs. They figure what they're going to do. We've talked about looking at obstacles. We've talked about what help's available. And we're now going to ask them to go into action. All right. This is where I want it to be clear, step by step. Those of you that were in the other sessions, you know that a lot of my behavior intervention plans literally look like a flow chart. I do that simply because most teachers will not read 22 pages of prose. If I can hand them a flow chart and say, kid does this, you do this. No, do this. This happened, then do this, this. I have a chance they'll actually do it. All right? If I can't think and lay out my plan that way, it's probably not specific enough. All right? If I can't clearly say, here are the steps, here's what you would do. Even if I don't do it, if I can't at least do that in my head, I'm probably not specific enough. Okay. How do I know if the plan is being implemented, and how do I know in terms of looking at those outcomes, what am I going to use to say it's working? Do I look at the changes in terms of what's happening clearly enough to say, I think it's working? Because I would expect to see, so for example, for John, work's being completed. All right, if I'm not seeing work being completed, all right, then I probably still have a problem. All right? I might look at engagement time as some sort of a sample thing. We're going to do some probe examples of actual active engagement. We'll take data once a week for 15 minutes. Is he engaged in this and what's going on? But I really look at what's outcome. Does he get the work done? If there's work to be done, well, how do I get it? How do I get this plan in place? Are there things that have to be done first, second, and third? All right. None of this, just as a warning, none of this works as cleanly as it sounds on paper. You're bouncing back and forth. Things are messy. It takes a little effort. Okay, we're just about ready to break for lunch. I think we got one or two. So Mrs. Barnes has decided that her first goal is to learn how to develop instructional tasks that have a strong likelihood for trapping John into success. This will require her to gain a better understanding of John's abilities and interests. She must be also willing to tailor the lessons to match John's situation. So how are we going to help her with that kind of situation? Again, we'll sit and brainstorm. We might want to do some assessment, or at least look at the assessment that has already been done. Can we identify better what he's capable of doing? What skills does he bring to the table? What problems does he bring to the table? What's his reading level? What's his background in science? Whatever. Observe fellow teachers who are skillful in academic differentiation. If she has to think about how do I change this lesson, can I put her with somebody in the school that's good at doing this kind of thing? Can I see some strategies that person uses in terms of how to get someone like April that can't read at the level of the class the information? Right? Talk with John and his parents to gain a better understanding of John's interests. Again, it's success and interest. Is there a way I can tailor the lesson more to actually entice him to want to be part of it? And provide John with pre-instruction. Maybe one of the things that I want to do is I want John to be successful. I want to have John come in before we introduce cell structure to the class. And we're going to do some pre-teaching. So that I can use him as a leader when we're doing it with a class, because that will trigger his wanting to be engaged. All right, so maybe I'm going to do some pre-teaching. So look at, again, the benefits and costs for following each one of those steps. If I follow the teacher, I might be embarrassed I have to go in and look at this. I should already know this. So if I have to come in and say, gee, you know, can I watch you, Tracy, because I'm not really good at differentiating and you seem to be really good at this, and so I'd just like to see how you do this, then I have to admit I'm not good at this. I don't want to do that. But it really would help if I could see somebody actually do it. Okay. Talk with John's parents, demonstrate concern and support. I might be rejected by John or his parents. They might say no. They might, whatever they say, expect that I have to do it. One of the dilemmas oftentimes is that people only think they're being listened to if you do what they say. Sometimes we listen, but that's not the best idea. Or it can't be done for other reasons. And just because you said it doesn't mean I'm going to naturally just accomplish that. And I'm afraid if I talk with the parents and they go, well, what John really liked was working with a little boy who likes NASCAR, loves NASCAR, as a kid with one of the students with autism. So we were going to develop a behavior thing. We decided I'd do a racetrack, and if he needed, like in racing, there are times where the pit crew can call a car in because it needs to come in. So the teacher might say, you need a timeout, so we had a pit stop, a place for him to go calm down. Sometimes the driver just senses his car needs some work, and he can go into the pit stop. And so we were telling him that there are times where you may feel you just need to have a pit stop, and you can use the pit stop. And so we did this whole thing on NASCAR, this whole thing. I built this racetrack, this plan. The dad comes in and he goes, that's not going to work. I go, what's the problem? He goes, he knows the layout of every NASCAR track. That's none of them. It's like, okay, I don't know anything about NASCAR. It's just a racetrack. All right, we'll make one that looks like Talladega. I don't care. But, you know, so looking at what's going on in terms of what's happening. There's one or two more slides and we'll get the heck out of here. What actions? Review John's records. Talk with John and his parents. Observe the work of a fellow teacher. And select one unit of instruction and work with a colleague to differentiate it. So we're going back through the plan. We get the action. What kind of support am I going to have? How am I going to overcome procrastination? Reinforcement, incentives, and rewards for action, both for the teacher perhaps and the student. Do I need backup plans? And how am I going to start backing away from the plan entirely? All right. So we're going to break for lunch. I think it's probably about lunchtime. You have time to go to the bathroom. We'll have lunch. When we come back, we're going to observe a tape. It's a tape that I actually did a number of years ago, and I've shown it a number of times. So some of you that may remember this, it looks a little bit like the Blair Witch episode. We see a little jumping and some static in terms of what's going on. But it's a teacher working with this young student, Mac, and what we're going to have you do is observe this. We're then going to break up into groups of 3. One of you is going to be that teacher. One of you is going to be the collaborator consultation person who's going to go in and talk with that teacher about what you saw go on and what you might do to develop a better plan for Mac. The third person is going to watch that helper and give them feedback on their use of some of these skills that we've used. I want you to identify what skills you see the person using, how that might have been effective, and we're going to talk about that. Then we're going to switch roles once, then we're going to see another video and do it again with other situations. That make sense? All right, let's go have lunch, guys.